Assalamu alaikum. Today we will work on DHCP configuration, the client side and the server side. For that, first we need to log in as a root user using su command. Then we need to check the IP address of our server. Our Ethernet interface IP address. So for that we will write the interface name EMPO0S3. So this is the IP address. We will configure the network on the basis of this IP address. Before that, you need to understand the difference between the IP address, the network address. So here the net mask is 255.255.255.0. It means the first three octets belong to the network part and the last octet belong to host part. So in this IP address 192.168.10 is the network part and the host is 16. So let's suppose the IP address is 192.168.10.16 and it has net mask. What is a net mask? In net mask there is 1 for network part and 0 for host part. Now the first octet is, it consists of 8 bits. So 8 times 1 in the binary, it becomes 255 dot. Again, this is the network part. Network part, there are 8 bits. 8 times 1 in the binary, it turns out to be 255. The third part is also network part, 255 dot. Or last one is the host part, and the host part is represented by 0. So in net mask, the 4 octets are represented by either zeros or ones, depending on if the octet belongs to network part or host part. If the octet belongs to the network part, it is replaced by all ones, and if it is belong to the host part, it is all replaced by 0. So this is the net mask. Now what is the network address? In network address, we write the octets of the network part, and in host part we write it at 0. For example, in this case, these 3 octets are in network, belong to the network, so it is 192.168.10, and the last one is the host part, so we will replace it by 0. So in this network address, the IP address could be anything having these 3 octets as the first. These 3 octet value will be the same because the network is the same, and we will change the last octet value to give the IP address to the host. Okay. Another important thing is router or gateway address जो हम देते हैं, and then is broadcast address. In network, if you have the network address, usually the first IP address of your network is assigned to the router and the last IP address is assigned to the broadcast address. For example, in this case, the first address will be 192.168.10.1. So this will be assigned to the router, and the broadcast address will be the last address. The last address होगा 192.168.10.255. This you need to understand before configuring the DHCP network. Now we will go to the configuration. Okay, so now just start with the configuration. The first thing is you need to log in as a root user. Then we will install the DHCP using command yum install DHCP. So installation will take some time. just install. It will download the packages and will install them. So you have to wait. Okay, so now the installation is complete. Now we will start the configuring the DHCP server. For that, the DHCP configuration file is called dhcpd.conf file, and it is located inside etc DHCP. So first we need to change our directory by using the cd command. We need to change our directory to etc DHCP. Then we will check the content. Now the configuration file is dhcpd.conf. So we will open that file inside the editor, vim dhcpd.conf. Here, okay. Here you can see the sample configuration file is here. You can either copy this sample configuration file into your DHCPD file, or you can write it all by yourself if you know the syntax. If you don't know the syntax, there are example setting of the DHCP server, so you can just copy the content of this file into your configuration file and then you can update it. So for that you have to copy the link here, this user share doc dhcp and then copy the content of this file into dhcp.conf. So for that we need to write the following command. First quit this, and then for the copy command we use cp, and then there are two arguments for the copy command. First is the source file and the second argument is the destination file. So source file you have to write the link, write the path, total path here. So the path was user share doc dhcp static dhcpd.conf.example. That was the name of the file, and where we want to copy it, we want to copy it etc dhcpd.conf. So this is the configuration file where we will configure our DHCP server, and the first argument is the sample configuration file. So we are copying the content of this file into dhcpd.conf file. Enter. Okay, there is some mistake here. Doc slash, yes, I want to overwrite. Okay, now we have copied. Now we will see the content of file. So now you can see you have the configuration file here. Now this is the syntax, how your subnet is assigned, how your subnet is syntax and structure of the setting of a DHCP server. You can add a subnet, the subnet mask, etc, etc. You can add the options here. You can alter one of the setting here, or you can comment all of this and then write your own network configuration lines, or the network address ki basis ke upar you can write the information over here, or you can also use these as it is and update the network on the basis of your IP address. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna just first comment all these sections. For the comment we need to go into the insert mode, and then for comment we use hash sign. So we will comment this, not the default lease time and maximum lease time, because we need to we have to use it. So maximum default lease time, maximum lease type, and then authoritative, leave that also, log facility also, and then comment all these subnets because we are gonna add our own subnet. So I'm just commenting all these. sorry. Okay, so we have commented all this. We will quit it, and first we will check the IP address of our device, and then we will add a subnet on the basis of our IP address. For that we need if config, and then we can use if config command, or we can use if config and then we can write the interface where we will gonna configure the DHCP server. So in my case it is CentOS3. So the IP address is 192.168.10.16. We need the IP address and net mask. So the IP address is 192.168.10.16 and net mask is 255.255.255.0. It means the first three octets belong to the network and the last octet belong to the host part. So in this case, the network address is 192.168.10.16. Now we will add this information in DHCP configuration file. So here you will have an option, this one. Okay, you can update this one or you can write your own here. I will write following the same syntax over here. So first start with this line, subnet Now my next is the network address. In my case the network address is 192.168.10.0 and the next is net mask is 255.255.255.0 brackets. Now the range of IP addresses means you will write the starting IP address and the ending IP address, whatever range you have or you want to use. You can use any one between that network. So the last part is the host part, so we will change the last part for the change for the range 192.168.10. Let's suppose I started with 15 and this is the starting IP address and then ending IP address should be 192.168.10. Any range you can choose. For example, in current scenario, let's suppose I'm using the 10 host, so the range will be 15 to 25. Then the next option is name server. We are not choosing the same server. We haven't configured the DNS server, so leave that. Domain name is also part of the DNS, so also leave that. Then option router. Now option router may we write the router address. Router address is normally the first IP address of your network. So the network address is 192.168.10.0. The first IP will be 192.168.10.1. The first IP address is given to the router and the last IP address is the broadcast address. So in this case, the last IP address is option broadcast address is 192.168.10.255. Terminator. Okay, the last thing is default lease time and maximum lease time. So we will use the same as this one, default lease time 600 and max lease time 7200, and then we will close the bracket here. So this is all the configuration we need to do. We define the network address, we define the range of IP addresses that we will use for the DHCP, and then the router address, the broadcast address. Sorry, broadcast may be broadcast address, and then default lease time and maximum lease time. So now we will save this by command WQ. Now we have written all the changes in DHCP file. Now we need to start the DHCP service and allow the DHCP in the firewall. To allow the DHCP in the firewall, we will use the command firewall cmd permanent add service equals to DHCP. The service will be added by this comment one. Okay, it is already on. It is a success, and now we will reload the firewall by using command firewall cmd reload. This will reload the service. Reload the firewall, sorry. Okay, it is also success. Now we have done everything. Now we will start the DHCP service. If everything is fine, you will see active and running. So for that we use systemctl command, systemctl enable DHCP. Okay, so the configuration is done. Now we will using the command using systemctl start the service, start DHCP T. Okay, first I show you what was the error before. We will see this is the syntax and this was written using that syntax. The only error was, if you can see, I wrote the router and it says the routers. So make sure that you write each word correctly, else your service will not start and will show you an error. That was my error, so I write it again, router, and I change to routers. So this is the syntax. You need to follow the syntax as it is. I had started, then I will enable the service, enable, and the last thing is I will check the status. If it is active and running, it means your server has been configured. It is active and running, so my server is configured. Now I will go and start my client machine, and then we will see if it is receiving the requests or not. Okay, now I logged in as a client from the client side. At the client side, you just need to have this white setting, and you can just see if there is static IP addressing or DHCP IP addressing. So you just need to check, select the DHCP, and then it will start accepting from the DHCP server. You can see the configuration, IP configuration, using ifconfig command, and the interface is ENP0S3. The IP address of this is 192.168.10.25. Now we will see if that the IP address that we are using at the server side. We can see it by checking the range. Range we selected at dhcpd.conf file. Here the range started as 10.50. It means the client is accepting the IP address from the DHCP server. You can recheck this value by changing the range and then restarting the network service at the client side and checking if the IP address of the client has been modified according to the range. So let's suppose I change it to 60. Let's suppose. So the client must have a 60 or 61 or 62 IP address. So I will change the save the changes first. Okay, so whenever you modify the configuration file, you have to restart the service. For that we need the command. First we will restart the service, we will enable the service, and we will check the status of the service. If it is active and running, your client must receive this setting. At the client side, first we will check the configuration. the IP address has not been modified, because at the client side, to accept the DHCP new setting from the DHCP, you must restart the network setting at the client side. For that, we write the command we service network restart. Now, by restarting the network service, it will again request the DHCP server for IP configuration. So this time, if your server is configured correctly, the IP address should be assigned according to the modified range in the dhcp.conf. For example, we have set the starting range 60, so it must be 60 or 61. Okay, the restarted. Now we will see if config enp. Now you can see the IP address has been modified. So this IP address is assigned by the DHCP server that we configured here. This is the server side and this is the client side. So this configuration that we have done in DHCP, this is reflected at the client side. You can again check it by, let's suppose I change the from 100 to 190, let's suppose. Okay, so I will modify this file, then I will restart the DHCP service, enable the DHCP service, and then check the status. It is active and running. Now I will go to the client side. At client side, I will restart the network service. You can see here it is restarting. The service is being restarted. Just wait for a while. Okay, the service is restarted. Now we will check the IP. You can see the IP address has been changed. So the client is getting the IP configuration from DHCP server. You can add as many clients you want, and the IP address will be assigned by the DHCP server. This is the first client, so it will have 192.168.10.100. The second client will have 192.168.10.101 and so on. That's all for DHCP configuration. Thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.